The Woman Across the Street, a true story. 3 years ago, when I was 14, my mother, my sister, and I had just moved into an old house located on the outskirts of town. The house was very spacious, with a classical architectural style featuring high ceilings and creaky wooden doors. The previous owner was an old woman who had lived alone and had passed away not long before we arrived. Although the house seemed a bit gloomy at first, we renovated it quite a bit, repainting the walls, fixing the electrical system, and redecorating the interior. Gradually, it became cozy and an ideal place to live. At least, that's what we thought until that night. It was the birthday of a classmate. I went to the party and came home rather early because I was too tired. Around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up and realized I still had my shoes on. I groggily sat up, went to the bathroom to brush my teeth and remove my makeup, then returned to my room to change into pajamas. While changing into my pajamas, I suddenly saw something standing across the street. My room was on the second floor and had a window overlooking the quiet street in front of the house. I pulled back the curtain for a clearer look, and my heart nearly stopped. A woman was standing under a tree, directly across from my window. She was wearing a filthy white dress, her gray hair curly and disheveled, hanging down on either side of her face. Her skin was pale, so white it was nearly translucent under the dim yellow streetlight. Her bloodshot eyes stared straight at me. Her teeth were crooked, with several missing, and her mouth was wide open as if she were trying to scream something, but no sound came out. She didn't move, just stood there, trembling slightly, making indistinct mumbling noises. I froze. I couldn't scream, couldn't look away. I could only stare back at her in utter terror. The horror intensified when I caught a whiff of her stench, a mix of rotting flesh and something moldy and foul. Even though I was on the second floor with the window shut tight, the smell seeped into my nose as clear as day. I burst into tears, trembling, and called for my mother. She rushed upstairs, turned on the light, and held me in her arms. I pointed out the window, speaking through sobs. "Mom, there's a woman across the street. She's looking at me." My mother frowned and walked over to the window. At that moment, I could still see her. She was smiling now, a twisted, terrifying smile. But my mother looked at me and said, "Sweetheart, what are you talking about?" "There's no one out there." I was stunned. She was still there. I could see her clearly. But my mother couldn't. That night, my mom had to sleep with me because I was so panicked I couldn't sleep alone. The next morning, we went out for breakfast. As the car passed by the tree where she had been standing, the horrible smell hit my nose again. I started sobbing uncontrollably, my stomach knotting with fear. From that day on, I woke up every night around midnight. I heard heavy breathing right next to my ear, even though there was no one else in the room. It happened about 5 times, then suddenly stopped altogether. But I never forgot that fear. I developed a nightly habit of pulling back the curtain to look down at the street in front of the house, just to make sure she wasn't back. Sometime later, I happened to overhear from a neighbor that the previous owner of the house, the old woman who had died, passed away right in the room I now sleep in. No one knew how she died. They only knew that when she was found, her body had decomposed, emitting a terrible odor. I'm still not sure whether she wanted me to leave that house or if it was just my own mind tormenting itself. But that night, with those blazing red eyes and that horrific smile, will forever be the most haunting memory of my life. The Mirror in the Bedroom, a true story. I never believed in ghosts, not until my family bought an old 3-story house deep in a narrow alley near the town's cemetery. It sounded ominous, but the house was unbelievably cheap considering its size and structure, so my father bought it immediately. While cleaning up, I found a large mirror attached to an antique wooden wardrobe in my bedroom. The mirror was old, with a tarnished black copper frame. I wanted to take it down, but my mother insisted we keep it because it matches the classic furniture. Everything started on the 3rd night in the new house. Around 2 a.m., I suddenly woke up for no reason. The room was quiet and dim. I turned toward the mirror and saw myself sitting up inside it. But the terrifying part was, I was still lying in bed. The reflection wasn't mirroring me. It was sitting upright, staring straight out from the mirror, which meant it was looking directly at me. I panicked and jumped up to turn on the light. As soon as the light came on, the image in the mirror returned to normal. It was just me, messy hair, pale face from fear. I calmed myself down, thinking it was a hallucination from exhaustion. But the next night, and many nights after, the same thing happened again. Sometimes I saw me in the mirror standing beside the bed, leaning over to look at me while I slept. Other times it was slowly stepping out of the mirror, with only half its body emerging before vanishing when I turned on the light. I began to lose sleep, constantly tense. I tried covering the mirror with a cloth, but every night the cloth would fall to the floor, as if someone had pulled it off. The worst night was when I dreamt that I was being dragged into the mirror. In the dream, I screamed, desperately trying to escape, but the me outside the mirror just stared at me with lifeless eyes. I woke up in a panic and saw bruises on my arm as if someone had gripped me tightly. The next morning, I begged my mother to let me remove the mirror. When my father smashed it with a hammer, a yellowed piece of paper fell out from behind the wooden panel. On it was written, "If you see it move, don't let it out. Don't let it replace you." Since that day, I never keep a mirror in my bedroom again. But sometimes I still feel a pair of eyes watching me from behind whenever I walk out of the room. The Girl Behind the Curtain, a True Story. This happened when I was 16. At the time, my parents had left town for a week to visit my grandmother, and I insisted on staying home alone to study for upcoming exams. I had the whole house to myself, a cozy two-story house on a quiet street. I wasn't scared. In fact, I enjoyed the silence. Everything was fine for the first 2 nights. I studied, made simple dinners, and went to bed early. But on the third night, something changed. I woke up suddenly around 2:45 a.m. to complete silence. Not even the usual hum of the fridge or the occasional creak of the wooden floors. Just silence. It felt unnatural. I turned on the lamp beside my bed, and that's when I noticed the curtain. My bedroom window has a long, thick curtain that reaches the floor. Usually, it rests flat against the wall, unmoving. But now, it was bulging slightly outward, like someone was hiding behind it. I froze. At first, I told myself it must be a breeze, or maybe the window was left open. But the window was shut tight, no wind, no draft. I stared at the curtain, heart pounding, waiting for it to move. Then it did. Not much, just a slight, unmistakable twitch, as if someone inside was shifting their weight. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, scream, do anything but sit there staring. But my body refused to move. After what felt like forever, I forced myself to whisper, "Who's there?" No reply, just silence. But the curtain twitched again. I couldn't take it. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, slowly inching toward the window. Step by step, my hands shaking. When I finally pulled the curtain aside, nothing. No one. But something wasn't right. There was a faint, moist handprint on the inside of the window. Small, like a child's. The kind that's left when you press your face and fingers hard against glass. But the mark was inside the room. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the window and found that it couldn't even be opened. It had been painted shut years ago. That night, I slept on the couch downstairs with all the lights on. But it wasn't over. The next few nights, I kept seeing movement from the corner of my eye, a shadow darting past the stairwell. The soft creak of floorboards upstairs while I was in the kitchen, whispering, too soft to understand, but clearly coming from my room. On the last night before my parents came home, I dreamed of a girl standing behind the curtain. Her long black hair covered her face, and her hands were pressed to the glass, just like the mark I had seen. She whispered one thing before disappearing. It used to be my room. I never stayed in that room again. Even now, years later, I sleep with my curtains drawn back, just in case someone's hiding behind them. The Knock at 3:17, a true story. It started on a Thursday night. I had just moved into a small studio apartment in an old building downtown. It was cheap, within walking distance of my university, and honestly, I liked the quiet. The building had that vintage charm, tall windows, creaky floors, and thick doors with brass peepholes. The first few nights were uneventful, except for the usual city noise. But on the fourth night, I woke up abruptly to a knock on my front door. 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I looked at the clock. 3:17 a.m. I was confused. I didn't know anyone in the building, and no one would be visiting me at that hour. I got out of bed, walked quietly to the door, and peered through the peephole. No one. I opened the door just a crack and looked down the hallway. Empty. No sound. Just the flickering yellow light at the end of the corridor. I closed the door, locked it again, and chalked it up to a prank. But the next night, it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Exactly 3:17 a.m. This time, I didn't open the door. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, and waited. No footsteps, no voices, just the sound of the refrigerator humming and the wind brushing against the window. I started leaving my phone recording audio overnight, just in case. On the fifth night, I captured the knocking. But there was something else. Right after the knock, there was a faint whisper, barely audible. But when I boosted the volume, I heard it clearly. Let me in. I stopped sleeping. I called the landlord, but he said no one else lived on my floor. The other units were under renovation. I should have left then, but I didn't. I wanted answers. The next night, I sat in front of the door with the lights off and a baseball bat in my hands. 3:17 came. Knock, knock, knock! I leapt forward and looked through the peephole. This time, there was someone. A man in a long coat, face pale and sunken, eyes hollow. He was standing unnaturally still, too still like he wasn't breathing. He stared directly at the door, like he knew I was behind it, and then he smiled. Not a warm smile, a stretched, unnatural grin that didn't match his eyes at all. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The knocks came again, faster, louder, more urgent. I called the police. When they arrived 10 minutes later, no one was there. No sign of forced entry, nothing on the cameras. They said I might be dreaming or stressed. But the recordings were real. The knocks were real. The man was real. I moved out that weekend. It's been 3 years now, and I've never heard another knock at 3:17 a.m. But I still wake up at that exact time, every single night. And sometimes I swear I hear someone walking down the hall, stopping right in front of my door, and waiting.